Yes, back at it a day late. Some family obligations has us going on a Wednesday. If you're catching us via the podcast, we stream normally Tuesdays at 8 or 9 p.m. Central, coming at you 8 o'clock Central on a Wednesday, and a lot to discuss today. Lots going on this week with the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, we're always brought to you here on the Red Gold and Bold podcast by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City metro area. Why risk accidents and liability in your parking lot when you don't have to? You can get your parking lot restriped today. Get it fixed today. Take care of all those potholes. A brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your parking lot safe as possible. You can find Gann Asphalt and Concrete online at GannAsphalt.com. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lots. Chris Jones is back. Now what? What does this mean for the Chiefs? What does it mean for Chris Jones and his future with the Kansas City Chiefs? We talked about that. What does Travis Kelce mean to this offense? Do we find out with the loss to the Detroit Lions? What does it look like for him back in the mix? Can Patrick Mahomes trust his wide receivers? Kadarius Toney talked to the media today, being Wednesday, and really took it on the chin. He basically took all responsibility for all the drops. That's great, but is he going to start catching them? Short yardage continues to be a problem. Why? What scares you about the Jacksonville Jaguars? And who wins this game? We break it all down right now on the Red Gold and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Yes, back at it. Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, and Eric Eager, I believe, changing the oil in his car. Is there anything you're not getting done right there, Eric, right now?
I'm a busy guy. I'm going to Philadelphia tomorrow to watch the Vikings and the Eagles. My flight tomorrow is at 5:30 a.m. So I'm probably going to take a melatonin halfway through the next pod and try to fall asleep. So I'm trying to get everything in before. So yeah, I'm but I'm here. I'm focused. I'm ready to look at the Chiefs Week 2 matchup here against the Jags.
This is Eric the multitasker, I guess, is what we're looking at. He is a busy man. Any kind of Eric is always a positive Eric, right, Jeff? I mean, we'll take it where we can get it. When it comes to Eager. How about Chris Jones? The Chiefs are taking Chris Jones back. Deal gets done. He's got incentives that can take him to more than he made. Realistically, he's going to come up a little bit short, maybe a little bit ahead. By that, I mean a couple $100,000 short or ahead. In all likelihood, unless something, I don't know, really amazing happens, right? I mean, basically to make any real money beyond what he had done, he's got to, the first time he's got to be an all-pro and the Chiefs have to make a Super Bowl for $1 million, for $2 million extra. He's got to be a defensive player of the year and the Chiefs have to win the Super Bowl. Both of those are highly unlikely, especially the second one. What do you make of this contract?
I think it's just a compromise. It's a way to get him on the field and a way to get him closer to moving on. Like I've said it the last couple of weeks, Chris Jones ain't playing here next year. However it happens, that's the outcome. And my guess is that he looks at this like the Chiefs are seeing this as a long-term play in terms of not giving him that kind of money that he wants. And he's seeing it as a long-term play himself in terms of, can he get to free agency? Can he get in the open market? Can he find another bidder after this season to give him what he wants? And so I think that it's like it was the best and probably the only likely outcome after everything that had happened. They weren't giving him that deal. He wasn't backing off what he wanted. And I feel like people have to understand that this is how the sausage gets made in the NFL. People don't like it when players do this kind of stuff, but it's really the only option they have to make some noise and try to get what they want. And what UAW is getting ready to possibly have a strike. It's going to have a huge impact on the economy. They want a lot of money. They're talking about corporate greed. And to me, it's very similar to what's happening with Chris Jones. Chris Jones is saying, this is what I want. And it's unfortunate that fans have to pay a price for this. The team has to pay a price for this. But at the end of the day, that's how you get your money in the NFL. If you are able to get the free agency and have a big payday, it's a good deal for you. So I think this is basically, he gets back on the field and he gets his shot at getting that money somewhere else.
Eric, what's your view of what this deal means for both Chris Jones and the Chiefs?
Man, I think for those people who wanted to see the Chiefs become the next Patriots, this is as good of a indication that they'll be like that as you're going to get, right? I mean, they kind of took the Katz brothers to the woodshed a little bit. And, I agree with Jeff. I think he's not going to be here next year. I think this is a way to save face for him. But make no mistake, like this was a loss for, like, he didn't get what he wanted. And even like the Chiefs, like the incentives that they put into the contract are not likely to be earned. And so it doesn't even count against this year's cap. Right. So I think that's, you have to look at this like a win for Kansas City relative to the situation that they were up against. You'd love to see them get a deal done with Jones, but that was never going to happen, apparently, given what the demands were on his side. So I think you have to look at this as a win for Kansas City. But, Jones tries to save a little bit of face here. And I think the average fan probably sees it as that. But if you dig a little deeper, it's not really a great deal for Jones. So I'm hoping that he plays really well. I'm hoping that he gets paid either in Kansas City or somewhere else. But make no mistake, this is a loss for the Jones and at the Jones side.
Two things before we move on. One, Jeff, what do you bench? Zach,
I don't.
Because
it's a long time since I benched anything.
Because I'll tell you why. Because
I lie on them.
He likes being able to raise his arm above his shoulder. That's why. Because when you get old, the shoulders fall apart. And then let's acknowledge Matt. Focused with the faux hawk, liking the new cut there from Erica, getting a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of massage to make this look like there's still some hair up there, but we try to get it done. There's $5 extra in it for the haircut person if they can avoid that fate.
Yeah. Listen, I think we're all in agreement. Kind of Tommy says, was that who's negotiating the contract? The Cap brothers, or was it George Costanza?
There's some. I thought that they were going to have the press conferences like 4 Seasons Total Landscaping after that one. Like, I honestly thought that they were going to have it at gates, but like in front of some gates, not actually. Right. Like there was some parallels there, I would say.
How about this from Justin? It's nice they finally ended the holdout, but I don't understand why both sides wasted so much time to only come to terms on a 1-year deal. I mean, that's what this ended up being. At the end of the day, largely, Jeff, is just a waste of time because neither side really got what they wanted.
Well, I agree. I don't agree with Eric saying that Chris Jones took the L here. I think the Chiefs lost a lot too because they blew it from the start. We're not trading him back in March. This is all, if you look at the big picture of all this year, it's that both sides probably made some mistakes. Both sides probably regret how it went down. And I said it a second ago. It's like Chris Jones sensed an opportunity to take advantage of the Chiefs not trading him. And by putting themselves in that position, he saw an opportunity to try to get what he wanted. I still think he's going to get a big payday. I think for some reason, people think he's going to become this lousy player, or he's going to get hurt, or it's not going to work out in the end. Ultimately, and this is something Chiefs fans have to accept too, because every fan base has to understand this. Players need to take care of themselves because once they're done here, they're forgotten. We can sit here and talk about what it would mean for him to have championships and all this stuff. None of that's guaranteed. All you can guarantee is the money you get. And we don't spend a lot of time talking about what Jim Irsay said about Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis, or Mike Evans not getting any kind of traction on a contract deal in Tampa Bay, or what's happening with T. Higgins in Cincinnati, because we're so conditioned to look at the team as being always right and the players as being greedy or ungrateful about what they get. I mean, it's ultimately, you have to fight for what you can get in this league. There's a reason why the NBA doesn't have holdouts. There's a reason why Major League Baseball doesn't have holdouts, because they have stronger unions and better pay packages. This is what players have to do to get money.
Yeah, I do think I get the point. I've said to a couple people, they're like, I mean, 55 million, isn't that enough? I'm like, how about the guy who can pay 55 million? Right? Like, let's keep in mind, these guys are asking for that kind of money because the owners are making billions. So let's that's the thing I caution all the time. I said, listen, this is a fight over tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars between a millionaire and a billionaire. That's it. Like they're bigger zeros. Like your poker game might be $1. Theirs is thousands of dollars, right? But that's what this is. The money's there to be had. And so I don't begrudge Chris Jones for going for every dollar he can get. Question is, I mean, listen, I do question walking away from $55 million. I do question. Let me ask you this, Eric. Do you think at 30 years old, let's say he has the exact same season he had last year, at 30 years old, isn't he worth less off the exact same season he had last year? And now he's got one less game to do it statistically?
Yeah, I mean that's why he's going after a deal, right? Because he wants to get those guarantees. Now, we talked about this last week. I think that if he would have accepted what the Chiefs offered, 2 years from now, we're either in the exact same spot or he gets a fourth deal, right? Like, so I think the Chiefs actually were trying to do him a solid with the deal that they gave. Now, it might not have been exactly what he wanted money-wise, but it was a structure that was going to give Chris another opportunity to get paid. And so, I think that if Jones had a different agent, I think that this gets done. And I think the same thing was true about Orlando Brown. And I think I think that I agree with Jeff that we are way too pro team, and that's because people are fans of the jersey and not the player usually. But I also think that there are situations where these agents kind of, they screw their players over in some ways, and especially these agents that only have really one key cog in their portfolio of players, and the Katz brothers are like that, and they're not willing to kind of accept kind of the realities of the situation as much, and so that's where I think that Chris erred. I don't think Chris erred in asking for a big contract. He's earned it, but it's more of knowing how these things actually work. It's easy to negotiate DeMarcus Robinson's contract. It's not that easy to negotiate Chris Jones's contract, and that's why I think the Katz brothers kind of screwed over Chris Jones.
Yeah, I don't buy the Katz brothers screwing people over factor. I think Chris Jones is a smart guy. He's an older player. Yeah, if you're a younger guy, I could see you getting led astray by your agent, but I think it minimizes his intelligence to say he just got some bad advice here. We just followed these guys down this dark road. He's a veteran, knows how things work. He had to make the call on this. Like, you made a lot of money in this league. You know where you stand. You know where you've been. You know what the market is. I just have a hard time believing they came to him and said, here's what we want to do. And he said, okay, I'll just go along with what you guys want to do. I put this all on him by making the decision that he wanted to go down this road. Look, it's, again, the grand scheme of things, when Frank Hart got paid here, people weren't saying, oh, my God, they gave Frank Clark all this money. It was like, great, let's win a championship. Got an edge rusher. When they gave Joe Tooney all this money, it wasn't like, oh, my God, it's like we gave Joe Tooney all this money. It was like, hey, we got somebody to block for Patrick Mahomes. So when Chris Jones asked for money, he's saying, I've been here and I performed, and he's not getting it. This is part of the conversation too. Like, who gets paid?
Yeah, I agree. But there are we saw it this week. There are instruments in Joe Tooney's contract that make it team and Joe Tooney friendly, right? Like the fact that Joe Tooney's
Chris Jones doesn't see that part of it, though. Chris Jones doesn't see that. He sees the money.
But I agree with that. But an agent, a competent agent can say, look how good this is for you, right? And explain that the fact is Joe Tooney's contract was very Joe Tooney friendly, but the fact is they had a $15 million guaranteed paragraph 5 this year that they were able to convert to sign, a bonus, and sort of it worked with the Chiefs. People call the Chiefs cheap, but the Chiefs are frugal money wise. So that $15 million doesn't have to go into escrow until now, and then it gets converted to a signing bonus when it needs to be. That's team friendly, but also Joe Tooney friendly because it's $15 million guaranteed no matter what. It's just structured properly. And I think that the issue is when you have a situation where the agent might not be competent, there might be daylight between what Jones wants and what makes Jones look good and what works with the Chiefs. And I think that a good agent is kind of like, hey, we've been around the block before. Here's why it's good for you. Here's why, and then they can turn over to the Brett Beaches of the world and say, hey, this is we're working with you on this and coming to a constructive deal on this. Like I do think that there's some culpability to the agency here. I don't think Jones.
I think you're making a lot of assumptions about what they know and how they operated. I think that end of the day, Chris Jones had to make the call about I'm going to fight for this extra $10 million in guarantees.
But like Jeff, we all we have agents, right? Like I don't
I don't have an agent, just for the record.
Well, but that's because you're smarter than me and Jeff. But
I don't think so.
But the thing is there are just things that I kind of give, I have too many other things to think about, and I give it to other people as far as like what this is, negotiating and stuff. And I get that Jones was probably the one who said, I'm going to sit out if this doesn't work. But I also think like contractually, there are ways to make it work that are not something necessarily a football player is trained to understand. I guess that's my issue.
Here's what I would ask, Jeff. Do you think that he's going to get back into free agency next year, or even just negotiating with the Chiefs before he reaches free agency, and ultimately make more money than what he was offered in this deal?
I think he can get back. I think he can get $55 million guaranteed on the open market next year if he's out there. And put it this way: if people talked about they could franchise him, if they put a $30 million franchise number in front of him, one, you're tying up your salary cap in the hopes that he wants to do this, but two, that's halfway to what he wants to be anyway. Why would you say, hey, we'll give you $27 million or $28 million and give him 30 in the first year? He's going to find his way to get to $60 million in guaranteed money over the next 2 or 3 years. I have no doubt about it. Chris Jones is not going to start being a lousy player. He's just playing a game. You guys are gamblers. People say, why would you do this? Because gamblers think they're going to win. The gamblers think they're always going to win. They don't care about what they lose. They care about what they can win.
So let me ask you this. If he's going to get $60 million guaranteed, presumably you're talking about $30 million a year over the first 2 years, or signing bonus, what have you. But we could basically say getting 30 per year is roughly what the APY would be. It may be a 3 or 4 or 5 year deals with all kinds of on the back end. But we're talking about him probably getting $30 million in cash in the first 2 years, and that being the security that he will have. I mean, okay, if teams are going to value him at that spot. And I know what you're going to say is, well, nobody had any cap room late. Word has been on the street. We've been talking about Chris Jones' contract for a year. If somebody really wanted Chris Jones, they could have called and offered something to get him and pay him that money, but nobody was calling to offer to pay him that money.
I think it was a trickier situation because I think people probably felt what the Chiefs felt was that he wanted to stay here and that he was going to negotiate in good faith with them being there. And that would give the Chiefs a lot more leverage in any kind of conversation about a trade. Like there was never a messaging out to the public that Chris Jones didn't want to do this or that the Chiefs were getting sideways with him or getting impatient with him. The talk was always, we love Chris. We want him to be here. His talk was always, I want to be a Chief for life. I think it was disingenuous what he was saying. I think he should have been saying, I want to get paid and I'll be a Chief for life if that happens. But let me ask you this. Do you think he's not going to be a valuable commodity if he's a free agent next year, come February, March? He's going to have people get overpaid all the time in free agency. Bob Miller got $40 million in guaranteed money at age 33 from the Buffalo Bills. There's going to be somebody out there who's going to want him.
It's a fair point. I mean, Eric, I think we sit and look at him. We talk about worst case scenario. There's a bit, an average year for him is 10.5 sacks. If you throw out his rookie year, you're talking about 10.5 sacks a year. His last 3 years have been 15.5, 9, and 7.5. The 9 sack year, by the way, kind of messed around with him out of defensive end and didn't certainly do him any favors as far as, creating statistical value for himself. So you could say that, hey, those numbers could be a little bit higher. I mean, if he's on the open market, I do think Jeff's right. On the open market, he can get more, maybe more. But more APY, is it a Tyreek Hill more? It looks like a lot more. But in reality, the guarantees are only this much. Or do you think a 30-year-old defensive tackle can garner, the $30 million a year he wants and maybe more than $55 million guaranteed?
I mean, he's a better player than Javon Hargrave, who got a lot of money in his third contract on the open market from
4 years, 84, right?
Yeah, San Francisco, and which is it's a pretty solid deal for a guy like him. And Jones is a much better player. So I think that not much better, but a better player by something. And yeah, like I agree. I agree with everything that you guys are saying as far as like, he has cards to play. Like that was my whole thing about the agent problem as well, though. Like the Chiefs were close, like with him. Like that's what I don't get is the Chiefs didn't like it's not like McCole Hardman, right? Where they didn't go or Juan Thornhill, where they're kind of like, hey, here's you can't find a meter, here's $4. Like they offered him a real deal. Yeah. And it's just that it wasn't the structure and it wasn't the puff. He wasn't able to puff his chest out about it, so he didn't want it. Yeah.
And Eric, let me stop you. Let me ask you this question. That's a great point. They were close. Why couldn't they get it over the top? Why wasn't, having been here for the amount of time you've been here, all the champion, why wasn't that enough for him to say, you know what, this is good enough for me?
Well, because I think it's the agency, and again, I'm not. I do not in any way say Chris Jones is not smart enough to negotiate his own contract, but it's more like we just that's the nuance there is when you're close, but there's something about that deal that pisses off the player. That I do think that there are instruments in the contract structure and we saw that this week. They literally gave him, incentives that were baked into a roster bonus that count against next year, or they don't count against this year's guy. Like there are ways to get from A to B, and I think, and I do think that oftentimes the lack of being able to agree on those things is not because of the player. I think it's because of representation. That to me, that's why they weren't able to get close, because I think the Chiefs value Chris Jones very clearly, and it's just like they have a bar. And I think that there was probably a way to get underneath that bar if they were willing to.
Just for the reference point, this year in free agency, the top two defensive tackles, Javon Hargrave, 4 years, $84 million. That's $21 million per, $40 million total guaranteed. He's 30.1. That's how old Chris Jones will be. Dalvin Tomlinson, second highest paid, 4 years, $57 million. That's 14 and a quarter, $27.5 million. Chris Jones is better than both of those guys, and by a wide margin. He's a year older than Tomlinson. He's the same age as Hargrave. I think Jeff's right. I mean, I think there's a chance he gets more over the course of those 2 years. But if he's going to play for Cleveland Browns or the Atlanta Falcons, and he's going to play on a 9-8 team, Jeff, you talked a lot in the past about how there's probably not a lot of endorsement money. Yeah. He's not a quarterback, but I don't know. There's something to be said for playing for a team that can win.
There is, but I say all the time, you'd be amazed at how many players don't care about that. If they get the opportunity, it's great, but I don't see Tyreek Hill over there regretting his life in Miami. I think he's making a lot of money. I think he's getting a lot of attention, and I think he's loving every second of it.
And there's
especially if you've already won.
Yeah, exactly. If you got two, you're even more on that standpoint. Yeah, that's again the fallacy of the New England Patriots, that everybody was sitting around there loving life and loving the Patriots way. There are a lot of bitter guys over there. There are a lot of guys who came and went, who were just like, I got my ring and I'm out of here. And so a lot of people who were there throughout the core years were either guys who took less money or guys who weren't worth a lot of money. And that was their secret. If the Chiefs can duplicate that, that's great. But end of the day, this is a league where you don't play for very long. The risk is very high, and you better get every last dime you can get, because we can sit here and say, oh, he's missing a chance to play on a championship team. They may not win a championship again while he's here. That's a very real possibility.
Yeah. Well, and the Chiefs, I mean, in a perfect world, the Chiefs have just as much of an obligation to Chris Jones as he has to him. That's the pro Chris Jones part, is that Chris Jones doesn't owe any more to the Chiefs than they owe to him, right? And I think our orientation is almost always, you play for this team, but Chris has done a lot for the Chiefs, and they, he deserves to be compensated there. And I think that that's lost a little bit. And again, to the point of once Chris starts to fall off, they're not going to have a problem moving on from him. Like, so I do agree with Chris trying to get his. In my opinion, I think that there was a path to him getting his while the Chiefs were also, taken care of financially. But
remember Jeremy Maclin got cut like whatever he was his last
June of
year
his
here, and he was
year
owned.
The Chiefs.
Yeah. And they just like threw him out the door in like June or something like that. Like, it was just like no one cried a second for that.
Well, he played one more year in his career. Played for the Ravens for one season, and then it was over for him.
Yeah.
And again, like Jeremy Maclin, got the Chiefs off the ground at wide receiver, and then it was like, well, we got Tyreek Hill, so let's move on. Like it's a tough league, so I don't begrudge. I mean, Chris could fall off a cliff this year. Who knows? Like, and he wants to be protected.
Listen, there are those smaller support muscle, the things that you need, the football shape. Any sport you play it for the first time and you haven't played it for a long time, you're going to feel it. He'll feel it. He knows it. But I'm going to tell you, standing up there, I mean, he continued to streak of every single year that I see Chris Jones for the first time of the year. He's in better shape than he was the year before. I mean, he is stacked. And so there is guy wasn't just sitting around eating ho-hos, okay?
No.
So now he's not in football shape, and I think you'll get 10 to 20 snaps out of him. But the man, he does not screw around when it comes to physically ready to perform. And so that's one thing that I think Chiefs fans can hang their hat on. You can hang your hat on Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer. It helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Plus, gives you a great first impression to your customers and clients. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Guys, let's talk about Travis Kelce. Jeff, he practiced today. I'm sure he'll be listed as limited and questionable going into the game, but he's out on the practice field and going. Let's start, first of all, how much did they miss him in the game against the Lions?
Well, I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? I mean, we talked last week going into it, and I picked Detroit because when you lose a player like that 48 hours before a game, your game plan goes out the window. And aside from the drops, as that game went on, it felt more and more like Andy Reid's play sheet was about the size of an index card. Like, there were only so many things he could call that he trusted. And once guys start dropping passes, that affects your play calling even more. And so, yeah, I mean, Travis opens up so many things for this team, and you saw the impact he has on Mahomes on third down. They didn't convert a third down in the second half of that game, so if he's on the field, that's going to be a different number. So, yeah, I mean, it goes without question saying he was missed. And look, I saw Brett Veach before the game and just talked to him about that situation. They were really concerned that it was an ACL or some kind of more significant injury. At the time, he said it was, this was last Thursday. He said they were talking about 7 to 10 days before he could be, ready to go again and be, feeling comfortable. So we'll see how these next, if that's let's see if he's making that shorter or longer. But, I think they're going to take their time and try and make sure he's okay before he gets back on there going full throttle.
I'd like to point out that Jeff's lying. He picked the Lions because he believes that the roar is restored.
Is that what it was?
Let's clear the air on that one.
Yeah.
No, it's funny because I think we all worried about what would happen if the Chiefs wide receivers couldn't get open, and yet they got open. And as a math person, and Soren's like going to kick me in the ass for saying this, but like drops are pretty random. And so like, I think if you re-rack that game and play it out again, the Chiefs win like 7 out of the 10 games, but we saw the ass end of variance there with all the drops. I also think, and Sam made a really good point on your show, Soren, the 7 wide receiver thing, it was one of the issues, right? Like them trying to prove that it was important for them to keep every wide receiver that ever put on a jersey for that team was you have to get guys into kind of like the fact that Tony played 11 routes and had 6 targets. That's not good, right? Like that's not I think conducive to winning football. Like I think part of the issue was trying to play 7 wide receivers and none of them ever getting in the groove. And all of them, every single one of those receivers, even Watson and Valdez-Scantling, they need to get snaps so that they can get some, and especially the young guys. If you're going to go with Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, got to play them, because just putting them in there and have them get a target every third route or whatever, that to me is not efficient football.
What do you now you got to, is this like running backs need X number of carries, wideouts need X number of targets to get into a rhythm?
I mean, yeah.
I object. Like, catch the ball. I'm not buying that. I'm not. No. I pass. No. I mean, listen, the 7 wide receiver thing, where were they lacking? Like, I know this is Sam McDowell's big drum, and I get it, and I think he makes some relevant points. But like, what did you look at in that game and you go, boy, they missed one of these?
No, I don't. I mean,
well,
they got open.
7 wideouts. Like, if they'd had 6, you would have kept what? What was cut that they were missing in that game against the Lions?
Well, I think that, and this is an issue when you lose Travis, because I think in the Patriot way, right? You use the first month of the season to iron out crap, right? In baseball, it's like the first 40 games is when you figure everything out. But the point is some of these guys got to play a lot so that you can evaluate them and see them in real action, especially, and I know they play their guys in the preseason more than most teams, but Sky Moore just doesn't have that many reps at the NFL level. Kadarius Toney just doesn't have that many reps at the NFL level. And I think if this year is about finding 3 wide receivers that can play for the Chiefs consistently over the course of the next 2 or 3 years on rookie deals, I need to see them play a lot. And Sky Moore did play a lot, but Kadarius Toney, it's like no practice all offseason, comes in.
He was the only one that got open. I mean, he didn't catch anything, but at least he got open.
Yeah, I'd like to see him get open more and play more if that's the horse they're going to ride.
Listen, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say, Eric makes a valid point in that there is value in younger guys getting reps. And that's where I think the divide is here, in that a lot of these guys we're talking about, even Kadarius Toney, they haven't played a lot of football. And so I always thought when Juju left, that was going to be a bigger loss than people realized, because he's caught 100 balls in this league. He's played with big-time quarterbacks. He's been a guy who's had to be a difference maker in big situations. And a lot of these other guys haven't. All of them haven't. And so the big concern I have with this group is that if Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore aren't getting it done, the other guys, Rashee Rice has potential, but he's a rookie. The other guys don't have a high enough ceiling that you can rely on them down in and down out. And that's where I think I think Andy sees it as, well, all these guys, the personnel groups, and we put them in with certain packages, they're all going to deliver. And I don't want to see the ball going to Justin Watson a lot. I don't want to see the ball going to Richie James a lot. I want to see it go to Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney a lot. And they aren't reliable right now.
Well, and that's the part where Travis is so important, because, and why Gronk was so important to the Patriots, was if you have that linchpin where if you need a bucket, you just go to that guy. And then the rest of the game, you mess around and throw it to guys who are struggling, but they're trying to work through it. Then you can win, right? When all the guys you're throwing to are guys that are going through it, then you see what you saw on Thursday night, which is the Chiefs couldn't buy a basket in the second half of Thursday's game. And that was a huge issue when you have a guy like, and that, again, I think I'm trying to see from the outside here, but if Travis was active, that was probably going to be the Chiefs' modus, MO was going to be, you go to Kelce when they need baskets, and then you work through the growing pains. And by season's end, you have 3 or 4 guys that you trust, but you have to develop that.
Don't you have to find who those guys are? Like, I know.
Yes, that's what they were doing.
You got to play them. I mean, you want like 7 targets for the guy who's the guy. They don't know who the guy is. Yeah,
the combinatorics though are 5 choose 3, not 7 choose 3. I think that whittles it down. And in addition,
they threw in week 1 last year, they had 10 receivers, 10 targeted receivers. This year they had 12, and they'd had 11 if Travis Kelce had been healthy. I mean, what's different? They just didn't win. That's what's different.
Well, they didn't win because they didn't have the one thing that was important to this entire thing, which is to have one player that is reliable. and throw them. And frankly, like, and I hate,
that's
like,
not a problem with the other receivers. That's Travis Kelce was hurt.
yeah, but I mean, that's the point. That's what we're talking about right now. Is like, why did they fail? Well, they failed because their plan was to have one reliable guy and to figure it out with those 7. And instead, they had 0 reliable guys, and they had to figure it out with those 7, and that's why their offense sputtered. Like, that's the whole deal.
Yeah.
But we all know that this game and every game moving forward, Kelsey's going to get doubled, and someone's got to show up and be the next option. Because right now, and maybe we're all guilty of this, but I'm willing to say in week 2, like the talent level. Someone said it in this comment page. The talent level is very suspect right now, and until that changes, like none of these guys have done anything to deserve being able to say, yeah, we should be, reliable targets. People should trust us. I mean, none of them have the resume to be able to say that yet.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, I'll continue to say, I'll ask the question: what do you see in Sky Moore?
Well, yeah, I was hoping for maturity. I was hoping for some savvy route running. He talked a big game in the offseason, but I didn't see him at all.
And then he was nowhere to be found after the game, right?
Oh, he
said it
disappeared?
before the media came in. Kadarius Toney did the same thing, but I'll give Kadarius Toney a lot of credit for today because he walked out there, he stood there, and he answered every single question. And even listen, and I pointed out, and we've talked about it, Curtis was one of the first ones to talk about it, but like he was one of the few guys that actually was getting open. Right, which is part of the job of being a successful wideout. And I threw that out to him like, hey, when you went and looked at the film, you had to see some positives. You were open, like getting open is part of the job. And he's like, yeah, look, you look for positives, but I've got to catch the ball. I didn't do it. He wouldn't even take, what was I'm not going to call it a lifeline because he was doing fine up there, but he made sure he was out there to eat crow. And he answered questions about trolling Giants fans on Twitter, and he doesn't care about that. But they troll me, I'll troll them. I mean, he answered it all. I have much more respect, and I have more confidence that he can be something by going out there and doing that because he's not running from it. Yeah. And you can't fix a problem until you acknowledge a problem.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Yeah, I agree with that. I give him credit for that, for coming out and. The Twitter stuff with the Giants, I think, was immature. Like, why are you still worried about a team you don't play for anymore? But you asked about Sky Moore. That game changed in the second half because the Lions stopped playing as much man defense and stopped trying to blitz. And they let's sit home. Let's keep them in the pocket. Keep Mahomes in the pocket. Play more zone, more coverage. And a guy like Sky Moore, as you said, he's so small. I guarantee you he's hard for Patrick Mahomes to find down there. And I remember specifically one play where he was in the middle of the zone and he couldn't reach the ball. Mahomes had to loft it up and he was too short to catch it. And I thought that's the problem with him. He's going to have in this league, that he's not going to be able to get open in crowds.
Andy Reid's great at scheming guys, but he's a drag slot type receiver. That's what I see. You know, like you got to get him crisscrossing and get him into the open and preferably short. Because you're right. The catch radius is not high or wide. It's a small area. So you got to get him open in space to make it work, and that's not running the routes. And I think that's one of the reasons why Andy Reid talks about Kadarius Toney being a number one and why he was featured so much is because he is big enough to get out there and go make those catches. And I think they need him to be that guy when it's all said and done.
Now, to be fair to the Chiefs, Juju barely played for the Patriots this weekend.
Well, I'm not
like they sold on Juju probably at the right spot.
Oh, yeah. I don't think anybody's arguing that point. I don't think anybody thought a 3-year, $27 million deal was the right way to go. First of all, if you're bidding against the Patriots, just drop because they don't know what they're doing, right? Like that's a. Now when it comes to wideouts, am I wrong?
No,
you're right.
Here's the question I have, and maybe I'm just a stan here. Watson and Valdez-Scantling actually made plays when they got targets on Thursday. What's the deal there? Do they? Because I know in the AFC Championship game they just said, "Forget it. We're just going to actually throw it to to MBS." Like, is that part of it too? Like, I mean, they were effective when they threw to those two guys, the veteran, and in the second half, it felt like they were working out too much with the young guys. Like that might be something that changes in the future if they need to get some wins here. Is that they just say they cut bait on guys like Sky Moore and they just go to the veterans for better or worse. And Valdez-Scantling's super limited, so it might be for worse. But those two were actually not dropping passes and actually being effective when they got thrown to.
Valdez-Scantling did catch both of us, but I will say again, I mean, I'd love to see more out of him, but he's played 6 years with Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and each year kind of looks the same. I don't know why we.
Yeah, the guy who wins MVP.
At some point, you are what the back of your football card says you are, right? And that's okay. That's a productive player. Listen, I'll have my guy out there, right? I'm trying not to just root for my prediction. He had a drop early, but what was wrong with what Rashee Rice was doing on the field?
Well,
yeah,
that's a great question. I mean, the point Eric brings up, excuse me, about MVS and Justin Watson. I mean, being at the game, I think a couple of those plays, it felt like Mahomes was forcing the ball down the field to them and really had guys like Sky Moore and maybe Rashee Rice open underneath on crossing routes. But I think in that game, I think he got to a place where he was like, I got to make something happen here. Like, I got to really pull some big plays out of this. And I don't know if last year he scored into them in those situations the way he did in that game. So for me, it was more like he trusted them more in those situations than he did the other guys.
Can we talk about the short yardage and why this is? I asked Patrick Mahomes, has it become a mental thing? Listen, I think he's always a little bit like short and curt after a loss. I don't know, if that's just his mindset all the way up till the next game, or just he doesn't want to appear to be flippant after a loss or what it is. But, and he's like, listen, you can get it on 3rd and 11. There's no reason you can't get it on 3rd and 1. Agreed. And unless you call different plays on 3rd and 1 than the plays you call on 3rd and 11. Start calling the 3rd and 11 plays, which Eric has dubbed over the years, Andy called the good plays. Want to take a shot at this, Eric, about short yardage and why this continues to be such a riddle?
They need to trade Blake Bell. And Andy needs to
Trade
walk into the well, like the Moneyball movie. You traded Pena? Yeah, I traded Pena so you can't I traded Blake Bell so you can't run that abomination of package on 3rd down. I don't get it. Like the 3rd and short is the moon to this team. 4th and short.
Let's talk about that play. If you watch that play, it sucks everywhere. It's not like Blake Bell gives something away. It's not like Rashee Rice didn't come across fast enough. Creed Humphrey just fires. Kind of wanders out. He blocks no one. Trey Smith is beat. Jawan Taylor is beat. Whoever is the tight end on that side is beat. It was a freaking jailbreak. It was the worst. It looked like a play that like nobody was really sure what play they were running. How is that? It was an abomination across the board. It wasn't one little thing. And we can get mad at Blake Bell, but Blake Bell, the one thing I would say is, how about sneak it with Blake Bell? It's the one thing he hasn't done.
He's 6'5", 250 pounds. Isn't he?
I know.
Ball forward. But yeah, this is the problem that they've had for the last couple of years. And every time they pull out a ring around the rosy play or some kind of stuff they've been working on for whatever, all week in training camp or in practice to unveil, to show them how much fun they're having, line up and work on short yardage. Line up and figure out what you want to run and get some things that you like and let your big offensive line do some damage. You can run sideways when you've got Tyreek Hill or even McCole Hardman and the element of surprise, but too many people now have seen that, and you're not surprising anybody when Mahomes is out there, for one. But two, you only have so many options in that situation. So most teams line up and it's either a sneak or it's going to be, handing it off to a running back, lead blocker, see what happens. And why this team can't do that, it's baffling.
Yeah, I don't get it beyond me. And I don't know why Mahomes stays on the field. And I asked Andy Reid on Monday, like, hey, how about put Blaine Gabbert in and run the sneak? Would you consider that? I said, other teams have done it, hearkening to the Jacoby Brissett Colts when they were doing that. And he's like, oh, you look around the league and the quarterback sneaks. They didn't have a good week. I'm like, what? Huh? Like, I will say this: the Eagles didn't run that wedge play once. They paid their quarterback, and now they're not putting him in that play. Which is fine. None of us are. We've all, I think, given up on the Patrick Mahomes sneak, But Blaine Gabbard's active and on the roster. Why not? He's bigger. To me, it baffles me. Is the run
everybody knows that if you're in short yards and Mahomes on the field, you're playing with 10 players, right?
Yeah. Yes, a fact. They go 10 on 11 at the part of the game that they're not any good at. That makes no sense. Is the running game a concern? Quietly, what you saw, Jeff?
Yeah, because there was no running game with Mahomes being the leading rusher. That it's I don't know how if Isaiah Pacheco was 100% yet. I don't know. I know what Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, and McKinnon wasn't really. I figured he may have had a couple carries. I can't remember if there were anything consequential, but it felt as if that was not an area they had a lot of confidence in. And that was a huge, huge factor in them winning a championship last year. Their willingness to create a physical running attack. It wasn't dominant by any stretch, but they could rely on it. And they had a guy who was fast, who wanted to run hard, and it softened defenses up. Like they've got to get that back into the conversation. And someone mentioned that in the comment section as well, that was probably as big a factor as well as them not being able to find any kind of consistency on offense in the second half of that game.
Yeah, no doubt. Eric, are you concerned about the run game at all?
It's always funny because, like, when the Chiefs need a run game, they generally find it. So, in a game like that where you got 16 games in front of you, I'm not that concerned. They started Edwards-Helaire. So, like, my prediction on the week of, like, was pretty spot on that they're going to beat, they're going to use Clyde. But Clyde, it's just as you were with Clyde. He's not very good, and that's another issue. So, that to me, I don't think it's the same thing. Like the offensive line's pretty good. The running back that wears whatever 25 for the Chiefs stinks. Like that's
your prediction to lead this team in rushing this year.
Yeah, I might write it off already. Sometimes it's good just to bail on a.
What was the number? Did you put a number on it?
No, he didn't put a number. Just say lead him in rushing.
Okay.
He's the third leading rusher today. 45 for Mahomes, 23 for Pacheco, 22 for Edwards-Helaire. Patrick Mahomes might have been the good bet there for it. Jacksonville Jaguars are next, Jeff. What scares you about the Jaguars?
That they may have found a pass rush. That Josh Allen had a pretty good game in that win over Indianapolis. And granted, it's the Colts, so you don't want to put too much into that with a rookie quarterback. But he had 3 sacks, and as much as we talk about their offense, like their defense, if they're able to get a more consistent pass rush from some of those guys they put money into, like Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen, I mean, they've got the potential to be a problem for some people. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out in this game. But Calvin Ridley is also a big factor. You knew he was going to be a player for them, and he showed up big in week 1. That offense is going to be fast. It's going to be a different kind of challenge than what the Chiefs put out there. I mean, what the Lions put out there. Lions didn't have Jameson Williams, which I think is a huge part of what they want to do offensively. A guy like Ridley can be a problem for the Chiefs.
Jeff, your concern level when it comes to the Jaguars, what are their problems?
Yeah, to me, I think like Doug Peterson. I'll tell you this much: when the game is on the line, Doug Peterson isn't taking the best player of his team off the field the way that Andy did on 4th and 2 twice inside the 30, 3rd and 4th and 1. Like Doug Peterson to me is a very underrated coach, and I think like he's going to squeeze all the juice out of the orange in this game. So that to me scares me because I think the Jags are not that talented in a lot of spots that matter, like offensive line right now with Cam Robinson being out with the suspension, and them going Jawan Taylor leaving, and them going with the Anton Harrison replacement. Defensive line Devon Hamilton's out. Like and their secondary is not great. But Doug Peterson right now, like I think is a tier below Andy Reid, but is a tier above Andy Reid in some of the in-game decisions right now.
Yeah, and Brandon Scherf is dinged up, right? Like that's
the Jags are AFC South good. They're not good.
Yeah, I think that's
but their coach is great. I think their coach is great.
Well, I think he recognizes when they need a little help, right? And he
Yeah.
gets it to him. I think Dan Campbell did it as well. I'll give you great credit. Both you guys have been talking about the Lions, but you both had them winning the division, I think.
I have them in the Super Bowl.
You have them in the Super Bowl. I had them as a wild card, but Eric, you've been touting Dan Campbell's game management. It's been very good, so I assume Doug Peterson's is as well.
Mhm.
What do you say, Jeff?
I love how Eric is like proud of that pick right now after the way the San Francisco 49ers killed the Steelers and the way Cowboys demolished the Giants. I got the Lions. I feel really good about that right now.
The Niners are the best team in the NFL until you start to involve their training staff.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Who wins? Let's make a prediction. What do you got, Jeff?
I think it'll be a close game. I got Chiefs 27-24. I mean, they bounced back pretty well, and the need to avoid an 0-2 start obviously is serious. Getting Kelce back. I don't think Jones is going to do a whole lot in this game, but Andy does pretty well against former assistants. I'll take him in this game.
Eric?
Yeah, I think the Chiefs. So the line has been anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5. I think they cover those numbers. I think they win by, a touchdown or so, kind of similar to last year in the playoffs. I like the Jags, but I think they're a year away. You don't pick first overall 2 straight years and then have a complete roster. As we know with the Bengals, you can be very good, but you're going to have weaknesses 2 years in if you're picking first overall just a couple years ago. So I like the way the Jags are going, but I think the Chiefs outclass them.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs outclass them. I liked what I saw out of the Chiefs defense. I don't think it gets worse with the addition of Chris Jones. That can happen where everybody has to refigure out how to play. I don't think it's going to happen here. I don't think it's as much as like in basketball. That's a big thing. Everyone thinks you just automatically get better, and it screws up the chemistry of your team. I don't think that'll happen with Chris Jones. I got the Chiefs 31-20. I think they win by double digits. I think they take out some frustrations. I think it's a focused team. I think Travis Kelce plays. And I think this team reasserts itself over the Jaguars. They beat them twice last year, and I think they do it again in this one, especially with Patrick Mahomes not hobbling around this time against the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Don't forget, we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, not a problem anymore. They've been making them disappear since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your lot. Call the best. Call Gann Asphalt and Concrete, 816-484-3338. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Consumer Sports, my name is Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.